Hi everyone, we are back with another session on best of logical reasoning. I keep visiting centers, and one of the things that students typically tell me is that they struggle a bit with logical reasoning. Now, logical reasoning is just what the name implies. It is logic based reasoning. You use pure logic and nothing else. Okay? Use facts, don't get opinions into it. Think logically. That so, for example, if you're speeding, right, and you see there is a speed sign that says speed limit 80 kilometers per hour, and just ahead of it you see that in the distance, maybe 500 meters away, you see there is a traffic camera. What is the logical course of action? You will reduce your speed ideally, right? So that is logical reasoning. Okay, I was given a certain set of circumstances and I took a very logical course of action. Okay. In logical reasoning on law or on any other entrance test, it is a test of your reasoning skills rather than your language skills. Okay. So let's look at what we have for you today. We have a passage. Let's look at this passage. I will walk you through this passage and then we will discuss a few questions. If you want, you can pause the video now, read the entire slide and then restart the video, and then obviously you will find me explaining that first slide. So here we go. In the 1920s, there were probably few people better qualified. So few people means almost no one else. A few means there were some people. The few means that there was a very select group of people and that group was, let's say, busy somewhere else or something. But when we say few people, it means no one. When I say I have few friends, it means I have no friends. When I say I have a few friends, it means I have some friends. So in the 1920s, there was probably no one better qualified to translate the classic Old English poem Beowulf than Tolkien. Why was he the best qualified? Well, he had learned Old English and started reading the poem at an early age. And it is an epic poem. In the second line, it says epic poem. Epic means it's a big poem. Okay, think Mahabharata, think Ramayana, epics. Okay, so this was a lengthy poem. He loved Beowulf and would declaim passages from it to the private literary club that he had founded with his schoolmates. So he would declaim passages. That means it again points towards the fact that this was a very lengthy poem. He would declaim, he would explain passages from this poem. In 1920, he started teaching Old English at the University of Leeds. So now he started teaching Old English. He was fond of Old English, he had learned Old English, he was very fond of this poem, he would declaim passages from it, and now he started teaching Old English at the University of Leeds in the 1920. He needed money. He now had a wife and children. So another reason for him to translate Beowulf. Okay. He loved the poem, he knew the language, he was teaching the language, and he needed the money. Anyone could have told him that he should translate Beowulf. How this would have advanced his reputation. Finally, he sat down and did it. So he did translate the poem. He finished the translation in 1926 at the age of 34. He started teaching at Leeds in 20, finished the poem in 1926, 6 years later. Then he put it in a drawer and never published it. Now, 40 years after his death, his son Christopher has brought it out. We don't know when Tolkien died. The passage doesn't tell us. Okay. So he finished the poem in 1926, and now God only knows how many decades later the book is now being published because Tolkien's son Christopher has brought it out. Why would Tolkien do that? Why would he not publish the book? That is what the author inquires. Why did Tolkien never publish his Beowulf? It could be said that he did not have the time. Then he goes into the reason: he got a position at Oxford, had to move his family. Such an event can disrupt the literary mindset of a writer. A few years later, he began The Hobbit, which, with its sequel, The Lord of Rings, took up many of his remaining healthy years. So, he also started writing The Hobbit. After he did The Hobbit, he wrote The Lord of the Rings. So, that also took a lot of time. That could be another reason why he never published the Beowulf, because he was too busy writing these books. It has also been argued by Tolkien's very sympathetic biographer that he was too much of a perfectionist to let the poem go. So, Humphrey Carpenter says that Tolkien was too much of a perfectionist. He would not have published the poem till he was happy that this was exactly the way it was supposed to be. So, we are getting into the reasons why Tolkien possibly never published his Beowulf. Let's look at the next slide. So, although Tolkien told his publisher in 1926 that he had finished the translation, he went on fiddling with it for a very long time. Was this primarily due to perfectionism? Beowulf was by no means Tolkien's only translation from Old English, and he gave a number of them, such as Pearl and Sir Gawain and Green Knight, the same treatment that he gave Beowulf. That means he never published them. Both Pearl and Sir Gawain were actually set in print, but Tolkien could not bring himself to write the introduction, so the contracts lapsed. The book was translated, it was sent to the publisher, they were set in print, but Tolkien never wrote the introduction and the contracts lapsed. Okay. The Hobbit was laid aside for years until a representative of the publisher went to Oxford to see Tolkien, borrow the typescript, read it, and prevailed upon him to complete it. So, perhaps even The Hobbit would not have been published had it not been for the very unrelenting attitude of the representative of the publisher. Another possible explanation for Tolkien putting Beowulf aside, a theory that has been advanced in case of many unpublished manuscripts, is that the work was so important to him that if he finished it, his life or the life of his mind would be over. So, there is this theory that Tolkien thought that if I finish this, my literary life is over. Okay, I am looking at literary desolation in my future. So, that is perhaps the reason Tolkien never published his version of Beowulf. He kept writing it, he kept translating it, he kept working on it. And then the author says, I think this makes the most sense. Beowulf was Tolkien's lodestar. Everything he did led up to or away from it. So, the author says that I believe, or I agree with the theory that Beowulf was so important to Tolkien that he did not want to finish it, because he felt that if he were to finish the book, his literary life would be over. Great. So, what did we discuss in the entire passage? Tolkien translated Beowulf, put it in his drawer, never published it. Why? Why did he do that? And then we go into possible reasons. Let's look at the questions now. What is the primary purpose of the passage? Why did he write the passage? Why did the author write the passage? To explain why Tolkien found Beowulf so fascinating, he mentions this in the first paragraph. He says that Tolkien was very fond of the poem. He would declaim passages of it. So, but that is not the primary purpose of the passage. That is just a detail mentioned in the passage. To explain Tolkien's reasons for translating Beowulf, again touched upon in the first paragraph, perhaps a little bit in the second paragraph as well, that Tolkien was singularly well qualified to translate Beowulf. But again, this is not the primary purpose of the passage. The primary purpose of the passage is to find out why Tolkien did not publish his translation of Beowulf. So, to explain Tolkien's reasons for not publishing his translation of Beowulf, C seems like a good answer. Technically, I would raise a minor cavil, a minor complaint that instead of using the word explain in option C, I would say to analyze, to investigate, to theorize. So, because he's not really read or confirmed the conclusion that this was the reason Tolkien never publishes Beowulf. But nonetheless, C is a good answer. It is always possible that you don't get the perfect answer. But out of the 4 answers, that is the most apt and that is the answer that you go with. Let's look at D. To explain why Christopher Tolkien, that is the son, published his father J.R.R. Tolkien's translation of Beowulf. This has not been discussed at all in the passage. Why did Christopher do it? We don't know. Did he want to make money off his father? Possibly. Did he want his father's legacy to be known to the people? Possibly. Did he feel that this book is so good that, book lovers, Tolkien lovers, literature lovers across the world should get a chance to read it? Possibly. We don't know why he did it. He did it, yes, but the why is not discussed in the passage. So, D is beyond the scope of the passage. The best answer in this case is option number C. Let's look at this question now. Which of the following best describes the content and organization of the passage? What is the content of the passage? The content of the passage revolves around why Tolkien never published his translation of Beowulf. And the passage discusses the possible reasons for it, and then the author selects one of the reasons as the most likely reason. So let's look at the answer options. The author is trying to logically make a point on an issue and is presenting arguments and counter arguments. No, he's not trying to make a point. Make a point happens when I am very confident of what I am saying and then I try to convince you. For example, if I am very confident that latex mattresses are much more comfortable than coil mattresses, then I am trying to make a point by trying to explain it to you. He himself is trying to figure out why Tolkien never published his Beowulf. So, A is out, plus there are no counter arguments. The author is trying to present his view on an issue by recounting personal experiences. The author does not mention any personal experiences. He never says, oh, I met Tolkien or anything like that. So, there are no personal experiences. B is out. The author is trying to understand or analyze a concept or point of view. This could be the right answer. The author is trying to analyze, understand why Tolkien never published his translation of Beowulf even though he had translated it. C is a likely answer. Let's look at D. The author is describing or providing information about a thing, event or idea. Description means pure description, that's all. There is no analysis in description. If I narrate the plot of a movie to you, that is descriptive. If I while describing the plot, I say, okay, I wonder why they did not do this, why they did not do this, that could be analytical. And while describing the plot, if I try to convince you that this was a stupid movie, then that becomes argumentative. The author is being analytical. He is trying to figure out why Tolkien never published his version of Beowulf. So, the answer has to be option number C. Which of the following cannot be inferred about Tolkien from the passage? He was an academician. Yes, he was teaching at University of Leeds in 1926. He took up a position there. Later, he started teaching at Oxford, I think in around 1930. So, he was an academician. This can be inferred. He was one of the best suited to translate Beowulf, clearly mentioned in the passage. So, B can also be inferred from the passage. He was a reluctant writer. I don't know. Was he? Let's look at D. We'll keep C for the time being. Many of his works did not get published, though they were complete. Now, this can be inferred. It happened with Sir Gawain, it happened with Green something, it happened with Beowulf. So, D is there. He was a reluctant writer. We can't say that he was a reluctant writer. He was maybe reluctant to publish his writings, but we cannot infer that he was a reluctant writer. Therefore, C cannot be inferred from the passage, and that is the right answer. Which of the following, if true? Now, please remember this. The moment we say if true, that means you have to suppose, you have to assume that these options are true. You can't say, oh no, this never happens. Oh no, this isn't possible. Oh no, this is not mentioned in the passage. It doesn't matter. You are being asked to assume that which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the argument that Tolkien was a perfectionist. So, I'll give you an example of the strengthen. If I give you the question, which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the argument that the speaker, me, Manav, is a better batsman than Sachin Tendulkar? Now, you know it is not true. Okay. Though you don't know it, I'll tell you that I don't even know how to hold a bat. But here we are being asked which of the following, if true, would prove or would show that Manav is a better batsman than Sachin Tendulkar. And if I give you the one of the answer options that says that Manav has scored 120 centuries with a strike rate of 150 and he's been knocked out in 50 of those innings, then it might show, and he has scored 1000 runs in one innings, then it will show that Manav is a better batsman than Sachin Tendulkar. So, in strengthen, we can't challenge the options. The options we have to assume, suppose to be true. So, let's look at option number 1. In his classes, he was pedantic and would catch the smallest mistakes in his students' assignments. Pedantic means very concerned about minor details, very nitpicky. So, A shows that he was a perfectionist because he would catch even the minutest mistakes that his students would make. A seems like a good answer option. Let's look at B. Tolkien was very attached to his novels and poems and considered them his literary babies. In that case, he was not a perfectionist. He was just too attached to his books, his stories, and he did not want to share them with anybody. Okay, so, there is no perfectionism involved there. B is out. Though Tolkien affected nonchalance, he took any literary criticism personally, irrelevant to his being a perfectionist or not. I could be a perfectionist and I could be very affected by criticism, or I could be totally unaffected by criticism. It doesn't take away from the fact that I am a perfectionist. So, C is out. Tolkien's first love was writing and he took up a teacher's job just to make his ends meet. Nothing to do with perfectionism. So, C and D are irrelevant. B shows that, well, it was not because of perfectionism but because of his emotional attachment to his works that he did not publish them. But A shows that he was a perfectionist. Therefore, the answer is A. Okay. Let's look at this question. Now, which of the following, if true, weakens the contention that perfectionism was the cause for Tolkien never publishing his translation of Beowulf? So, now we have a weaken the argument that, so the main argument is that Tolkien was a perfectionist. That is why he did not publish his version of Beowulf. Now, we have to weaken it. So, let's look at options. Tolkien's notes on improving his literary writings were often lengthier than his translations. This would show that he was a perfectionist, that he would make extensive notes for himself, to himself, explaining and detailing how he could become a better writer. That shows that he was a major perfectionist. So A will strengthen the argument that he was a perfectionist. Tolkien was very attached to his novels and poems and considered them his literary babies. Now, this, as we discussed in the last question, this shows that maybe it was not perfectionism that caused him to not publish his books. Maybe it was his emotional attachment to the works that he did. It's like, it's like if I cook something, okay, and I don't want to share it with you because I'm greedy for it myself, right? So then it is not perfectionism, it is my greed or my unhealthy attachment to the food that I've made that is causing me to not share it with you. So B seems like a good answer. Let's look at C. Tolkien confessed to his wife that he was never quite satisfied with his work. This will again show that he was a perfectionist. So C is out. Tolkien's first love was writing and he took up a teacher's job just to make his ends meet. Irrelevant to the discussion of whether he was a perfectionist or not. Therefore, the answer has to be option number B. He was very attached to his literary works and he did not want to part with them. That is why he never published them. So, the answer becomes option number B. And with that, we come to an end of this session. So, please revise all of your logical reasoning from the books, revise questions from the books, use the points that I have discussed with you in approaching those questions. And if you would want to see more videos on some topics, please leave those in the comments. My name is Manav and I am from IMS Mumbai. Thank you. See you.